Well, hello there everyone. Last time around I ranked the bosses of Pragmata from worst to best, and I still think this game is excellent, but from time to time I get the itch to make a difficulty ranking for these videos, and this time is no exception. So in this video I'm going to be ranking the 9 bosses of Pragmata from easiest to hardest. As a quick disclaimer, all the bosses were fought on standard difficulty, which is the highest difficulty available when you first start the game. Otherwise, I don't see the need to draw this video out any further, so let's dive on in. Number 9, Sentinel. The first Sentinel fight is in my opinion the easiest of the lot because it's barely even a boss fight. It's more so a game of survival, as you just have to stall him out until Diana gets healed. Not to say there's no threat of dying here, it's not like Bode in Jedi Survivor, but it's one of the game's 2 bosses that's more story focused than gameplay focused, and while this one isn't as scripted as the other story focused boss, I feel confident that I will beat this guy again without any issue, because I'm in full control of the fight. So in my opinion, he's the wet paper bag of the bunch, and even with the whole survival thing, it doesn't even last a full minute. I think you'd have to actively try to die, or just have your controller disconnect. Number 8, Abiasis. Well, it wouldn't be a Capcom survival horror game if we didn't have a giant blob monster at the end. Gotta wonder if Capcom's a fan of Akira. Anyways, I'm not sure if I'd consider this one harder or easier than its blobby brethren you encounter in the Resident Evil games, because on one hand, it's not really a damage sponge, but at the same time, it is more of a reflex test and there is some actual danger of dying here. It's not a case of just pointing the gun and holding the fire button until scary thing goes bye-bye. Considering the boss it's immediately following, I'll happily take a much easier victory lap though. The fight isn't hard, but having to hack under pressure and the fact that the battle goes on for about 2.5 minutes instead of 45 seconds leads me to putting the fight above Sentinel in terms of difficulty. Number 7, Sector Guard. The first boss of the game isn't that difficult, who'da thunk. With its only means of offense being a fairly well telegraphed charge attack and missiles that indicate where they're going to land well ahead of time, the only real danger of this fight is getting too happy with the dodge boost because it's still super early in the game and you have basically no upgrades to speak of, so if you boost too much and run out of stamina, you're gonna take a hit. If you hadn't picked up the extra healing charge, then it's a little bit more dangerous, but with so many scripted staggers in the overdrive protocol, even if you have only a single weak heal to your name, that should be more than enough to topple this foe without too much trouble. Number 6, Creator. This guy is big and intimidating looking, but quite honestly, we're still in the easy boss territory. This fight just takes a lot longer than the bottom 3, and he has more attacks you need to watch out for. Phase 1 is honestly easier than even Sector Guard, but getting to Phase 2, his filament pillars necessitate you stay mobile and observing where the spikes are going to come up from, as well as needing to shoot his antennas. It's not a super hard fight by any means, and nothing here is too demanding, but it is more to keep track of than the earlier bosses, and his damage output in Phase 3 is spooky. Sure, the giant laser has such a long wind-up you could be the entirety of Kirby's Dreamland before it finishes, but it's not an attack you can just bypass entirely. You do need to actively dodge it and respect the damage because it has so much power that it straight up turns off the boss music, and I would say the fight is long enough that he's able to avoid being super easy and being in the little Timmy corner of bosses. Instead, he's still easy, but it's not too easy. Number 5, Corrupted Sentinel. We actually see a pretty big jump in difficulty here. We're going from like 4 out of 10 on the difficulty scale to a solid 6 out of 10. The Corrupted Sentinel ends up at the halfway point solely due to how low his HP and weakness to being staggered is. His damage output is noteworthy, his aggression is much higher than average, his move variety is decently large, and his attack speed is rivaled only by one other boss in the game, and this guy's here to make sure that fight doesn't feel completely overwhelming. Having to juggle Diana's burst attacks to clear out dead filament isn't exactly hard, but it's an extra wrinkle that players need to keep track of during the fight. And honestly, if you're not someone that plays action RPGs or action games too often, I could see this fight being a fair bit tougher as it's much faster paced than your average survival horror boss battle. Overall, I think the Corrupted Sentinel isn't necessarily super hard, but he's kind of the difficulty gatekeeper. Anything below him can be beaten first try without too much effort, while anything above him will require a decent amount of focus and effort from the player, though not necessarily in the category of being super oppressively difficult yet, where it's going to take you multiple attempts. This guy shouldn't take you more than 2 or 3 attempts, assuming that you are, well, sufficiently upgraded and comfortable with the game's combat. Number 4, Luna Digger. Okay, now things are starting to get a bit tougher. The Luna Digger is about the point where things are going to, well, expect you to be really good at the game. And he does about as much damage as you'd expect a giant mechanical worm the size of Rhode Island to do. As in, it hits like a freight train. But his attacks are well telegraphed, so a player that's focusing shouldn't struggle too much until you get to the second phase where his drones come out. Now, to be fair, his drones aren't that strong on their own and can be easily hacked, but this boss is going to test to see how good are you at performing under pressure and how well can you stay on top of things. If you're a good multitasker to quickly swap between the drones and hack them and then get back to the Luna Digger, then the boss will pose no trouble to you. However, if you're not able to juggle all that in quick succession, then things will quickly get out of hand, given that he also moves around pretty fast, he has a ton of health, and has some of the highest damage output in the game. It's no real secret why this thing was the final guard between you and Edis. Most chaser bosses lose their threatening factor the instant you battle them properly, but that is not the case for this boss, as he's still just as dangerous in this arena as he is throughout the mining site in the lunar tunnels. Overall, I'd say we're kind of at the point of, yeah, we're actually in pretty challenging boss territory from this point on. Number 3, Sector Guard Mark II. Unfortunately, not all those fights are hard for the right reasons. This boss does not deserve to be this high on the list because he's tough for all the wrong reasons, and that is being flanked by 2 other strong enemies that have some attention-demanding attacks, while the boss itself is able to quickly charge across the arena and has attacks capable of killing you very quickly. The other hard bosses are tough because of complex mechanics and managing stressful situations. This fight is hard because they just crammed a boss and 2 strong enemies into a fairly small arena and said, "Have fun, you jackass." I genuinely don't want to imagine trying to clear this boss fight without Confuse and the Decoy Blaster, so I guess it's a blessing that this is the one boss in the game that is significantly affected by all status effects. But of course, we couldn't leave things there. Instead, when he's at half health, the Thunderdome activates, and now all of a sudden you have to watch out for lightning striking on top of his missile spam, and these attacks aren't synced up at all. If you can just take out the other enemies, it shouldn't be too bad to finish it off, but it's just irritating and far and away my least favorite boss in the game, as it's hard for all the wrong reasons. Number 2, Garden Keeper. This is the first major boss of the game that I think most players will take more than one attempt to beat. He's smaller than Sector Guard and especially the creator, but he's a lot more agile and his explosive follow-ups can make him pretty dangerous. But of course, if he only had his phase 1 moveset, then he'd barely rank above the bottom roster of mooks. The real challenge is in phase 2, where he gains the ability to scale the walls, rain down lightning on your location, fire off missiles, fire out multiple large lasers that cover the ground, at which point he simply runs the lasers along the battle arena to do as much damage to everything as possible, and we can't forget the mines as well. It's like the Luna Digger, where there's a lot of a challenge that's just simply juggling everything, but at the same time, while Luna Digger mostly kept his attacks to the ground and made it very obvious when he was going for his missile attacks, this fight is going to be a lot less obvious with what's going on. Now, it's very satisfying to execute, but when I'm having to juggle chainsaws while a Centiscorpion is trying to crush me to death, I'm not going to pretend like this boss can't be a tough time. He took me 3 attempts to bring down, and probably would have taken longer if he didn't become so vulnerable to the Riot Blaster's mini stagger effect of stopping it in his tracks. Don't be afraid to try that trick if you're struggling, it might just be the key you need to win. The Riot Blaster is great. Number 1, Idea. Unsurprisingly, the fight with the main villain at the end of the game is the toughest boss of the lot. It's not even close how much tougher this fight is compared to the rest of the game, to the point this boss took me more attempts than every other fight in the game combined. She has the dead filament armor that has to be destroyed by Diana, she's got plenty of hazard nodes, so you have to be careful when trying to hack her, and she has combos with alternate follow-ups and finishers on top of being the fastest boss in the game. Then at half health, she gains a new passive defense where she's able to attack your hacking grid. Initially, it's just part of a scripted segment where all you have to do is focus on hacking and avoid the giant red lines of death, but after she drops below half health, it's just a thing that's active at all times now. While she's staying just as aggressive, and there's a bunch of other attacks you need to watch out for. It's to say nothing about her easily having damage output of over 1,000 damage without much effort, which, if you haven't upgraded your health, means you're dead, which I don't think you would have gotten this far without upgrading your health unless you're doing a no upgrades run, but I digress. And she can fairly quickly shrug off any status effects short of, well, staggering her from a full heat gauge. That's to say nothing about her final phase where she pulls out the unlimited blade works, dropping dead filament everywhere. That's not only going to hit hard, but it also creates crystals that get in your way, making positioning even harder to avoid. This fight is one of the best ones Capcom has made, but it's also one of the toughest and most demanding battles in the game, and it demands the player stays on point for the whole fight and just about requires a third arm to beat. It's not every day that the best boss in the game is also its hardest boss, but in this case, if you're looking for a tough challenge, you'll find it here and then some. Maybe that's why Resident Evil Requiem's bosses were so easy. Pragmata took all the challenge, I suppose. Anyways, good boss, but a really challenging one that necessitates locking in hard to beat. And you know what? I'm okay with that. And that is gonna do it for this video. Pragmata has a pretty strong boss lineup in the quality front and a decent enough group in terms of challenge. I made a video covering the game's bosses from worst to best, so I recommend checking that one out if you haven't already. Either way, that's all I've got for this video. If you'd like to see more content of varying quality, consider liking, subscribing, and hyping the video, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care.